The wind was cold that morning, the kind that carries a silence heavier than words. Rows of black sedans lined the gravel drive of Arlington National Cemetery, their chrome bumpers catching the dull winter light. Inside the iron gates, hundreds gathered beneath the shadow of a giant oak tree, where the casket of a four-star general waited to be lowered into the earth. Flags fluttered in crisp precision, the brass of the military band gleamed, and soldiers in dress blues stood like statues. Outside the gate, a man stood alone. His name was David Mercer. No uniform clung to his shoulders now, just a weathered brown jacket, frayed at the cuffs, and jeans that had seen better days. A neatly folded program lay in the hands of others, but David held nothing. His boots, scuffed from years of work, shifted slightly as he leaned on the fence. He was early. He had always been early, whether it was for a patrol briefing in Afghanistan or a shift at the machine shop where he now worked. But today, he wasn't early for duty. He was early for something he wasn't even sure he was allowed to attend. The guards at the gate gave him the same look they'd given every uninvited fascia firm, professional, unmoved. "Invitation only, sir," one said, his voice low but decisive. "This is a private service." David nodded once. He didn't argue. He never did. Still, he stayed. Inside, the funeral unfolded with military precision. Generals, admirals, senators, and decorated officers filled the front rows. They all came to honor General Marcus Hale, a man whose leadership had shaped campaigns and saved countless lives. To the world, Hale was a legend, a strategist, a warrior, a man of flawless command. To David, he was something else entirely. Not a general. Not a symbol. But a man who had once whispered thank you on a blood-soaked night in a desert half a world away. 10 years earlier, in the darkness of Helmand Province, Afghanistan, Sergeant David Mercer was a combat medic assigned to a small unit under then-Colonel Hale's command. A mission had gone sideways, an ambush in a narrow valley, gunfire ripping through the night. Mercer's squad was pinned down. Men were bleeding. Chaos reigned. And then, through the crackling radio and the roar of gunfire, came the colonel's voice, steady, clear, unshakable. Hale had stayed behind to cover the retreat, giving orders that would save dozens of men, but at the cost of his own safety. David found him there, half buried in rubble from a mortar blast, shrapnel slicing deep into his side. Hale should have died. The medevac was delayed. Every minute mattered. David didn't think. He moved. For 3 hours, he fought to keep the colonel alive via plugging wounds with trembling hands, whispering words of encouragement, refusing to give in to the inevitable. At one point, when the colonel tried to wave him off, David gripped his hand and said, "Not today, sir. Not on my watch." The colonel survived. The battle report credited fast medical response. Official commendations were written. But David's name was buried in paperwork, lost among the noise of war. When David came home, he returned to a quiet life. No parades. No speeches. Just a single dad raising his little girl, Emma, after his wife left during deployment. His medals gathered dust in a drawer. The world forgot him. But Hale never did. Back at the gate, David watched as the honor guard lifted the flag-draped casket. The 21-gun salute thundered across the hill, each shot echoing like a memory. He swallowed hard. He hadn't come for recognition. He'd come because the man inside the casket once trusted him with his last breath. "Sir, you can't stand here," the guard said again, softer this time. "This is a closed ceremony." David nodded. "I understand," he replied quietly. He turned to leave. And then a voice cut through the air. "Wait. Did you say Mercer?" Everyone turned. An older man in a sharply pressed uniform of 4 gleaming stars on his shoulders was striding toward the gate. He moved with urgency, his eyes searching. It was General Hale's former chief of staff, General Raymond Brooks, a man whose presence made even seasoned officers stand straighter. "Yes, sir," the guard stammered. "This gentleman was just leaving." Brooks' eyes locked on David. "David Mercer?" David froze. "A broken bar, yes, sir." In an instant, the general's expression softened. He stepped forward and clasped David's hand with a grip that spoke volumes. "We've been looking for you," Brooks said, his voice thick with emotion. "General Halley broken bar. He left instructions. If you came, you were to be brought in Sadia front row." David blinked, stunned. "Yeah, I didn't want to intrude." "You don't intrude on the man who saved his life," Brooks said, his voice firm. "Come with me." The crowd parted as David entered. Whispers followed, but no one questioned. Brooks led him to a seat beside the general's family. The widow reached for David's hand and squeezed it gently. When the eulogy began, Brooks took the podium. His words carried across the silent field. General Hale was many things: a leader, a strategist, a hero. But what many don't know is that he lived the last decade of his life because of a man who asked for nothing in return. A man who saved him under fire and then disappeared into quiet service to his family and community. That man is here with us today, a broken bar Sergeant David Mercer. Every head turned. Soldiers snapped to attention. The widow wept openly. David felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, but he didn't stand. He simply lowered his head, the memory of that night flooding back. He hadn't done it for glory. He'd done it because it was right. General Brooks continued, his voice breaking slightly. General Hale never forgot. He wanted the world to know that real heroism isn't always in the stars on a shoulder or the stripes on a sleeve. Sometimes it's in the hands of a medic who refuses to give up. After the service, people approached David one by one. Soldiers saluted. Strangers thanked him. A young private pressed a folded flag into his hands, a gift from the family. But the moment that stayed with David came later, when Hale's widow whispered through her tears, "He said you were the bravest man he ever knew." David held the flag tightly. He thought of Emma, waiting at home, and of all the quiet sacrifices so many like him had made. He thought of the men who never came back, whose names no general could speak from a podium. As he left the cemetery, he paused at the gate where he had first stood unseen. The guards straightened as he passed. One saluted. David returned it with a nod, his eyes misting. He hadn't come for recognition. He hadn't come for thanks. He came to say goodbye. But the truth had a way of finding the light. In the end, David walked back into the world the same way he'd arrived, quietly, humbly, but now carrying something more than a folded flag. He carried the reminder that even the smallest acts of courage can echo louder than the sound of a 21-gun salute. If this story touched your heart, remember what General Hale believed to his last breath: heroes aren't always the ones we see coming.